All right, so we got to look at plant growth and development. So we've got to look at, I mean, obviously kind of stages of a plant's growth. That's important. We need to also look at the things that cause growth. Now, what kind of things could cause growth in people? What kind of things cause growth in people? Protein can be used. It's a building block for sure. What tells your body it's time to grow? Yeah, you get older, you reach certain development, but all of that development is still cued by something that courses through your veins. Hormones. Yeah, okay. Hormones are the chemical signals that make everything happen in the human body. All right. Well, plants produce hormones too. Okay. They're chemically quite similar actually, but the way they get to where they're needed is quite a bit different, because obviously a plant does not have a circulatory system, and as a result they also don't have glands. Okay, the human body, we got glands that produce specific hormones. You got your adrenal glands, okay, that sit right on top of your kidneys. That's a good place for a gland to be because there's lots of blood vessels that go to your kidneys, right? And they can, when they start pumping out adrenaline, it rapidly gets to the blood, and within 3 seconds it's everywhere in your body. Okay. Similarly, with your pancreas, it produces insulin. Okay, insulin's a hormone. There's lots of blood vessels in the digestive system. That's, you know, it's got quick access to where it needs to be. Your pituitary gland, that's at the base of your brain, okay, basically is the master gland. It signals all the other glands that they need to do their job. Okay, and again, there's lots of blood vessels running to the brain, so it's in a spot where it can rapidly get its chemical messengers to the rest of the body. If you're a plant, you don't have that option. So every single cell within a plant has to be able to produce all the hormones the plant could need. Okay, so in that way, the plant's cells are a little bit less specialized than animal cells are. Okay, not every cell in your body is going to be able to produce adrenaline. They're not specialized to do that, but the cells of your adrenal gland are. But in a plant, they've got to be able to produce the hormones everywhere. And they have less hormones. Okay, plants don't need as many chemical signals as animals do, because a lot of our signals have to do with dealing with problems in our environment that are threatening to us. Since plants can do absolutely nothing about threatening things in their environment, it does very little good to have adrenaline, because they would just sit there and shake, right? If they could even do that. So it doesn't do them much good. So theirs are mostly to do with timing of like fruit growth, dormancy, and then obviously like just general growth. All right, so we're going to be looking at those kind of things. Okay, we talked about factors that can affect the growth of a plant yesterday, so we kind of covered those already, but we'll quickly review some of them. Okay, we're going to look at the hormones responsible for growth and development, and understand that plant shape is not fixed, but it is the result of the interaction of environmental factors and growth responses. Okay, if you look up here at the front, these two plants are the same species. All right, and you can see their leaves, okay, they have that kind of yellow variegation and kind of same shape and whatever. All right, but look at this plant. If I take it off the TV here, okay, only growing on one side. Okay, well, now look at this plant, which is genetically similar. It grows on all sides. Why? Why are they different? Well, they're in the same place. Shouldn't they get the same kind of light? By the way, I got to turn it now because that's why it grows that way. The other one I don't turn. Hint, hint, that's why they look different. Okay, I never turn the first plant that I showed you. It always hangs from the TV in that orientation. This one gets rotated about 120 degrees every time I water it, except for the last time I watered it when I forgot to do it, which is why I'm doing it right now. Okay, so I changed the environment for this plant on a regular basis. Now, a different side of this plant is going to get sunlight. The side that hasn't gotten sunlight for a while because it has the least leaves on it, right? This one always faces the light source. So it only grows leaves on this side. What good does it do to grow leaves towards that box? It's a waste of energy. It's not going to get anything out of those leaves because they don't face the sun, right? So a plant's shape is not genetically predetermined like ours is. We know that human beings for the most part, are going to grow up to have 10 fingers, 10 toes, okay, 2 arms and 2 legs, right? All that kind of stuff. We have a very genetically fixed shape, right? Things that could affect our shape might be, you know, our diet, our activity level, things like that. But in general, we're still going to have that same kind of shape, right? But for plants, it's entirely dictated by where they grow and the environmental influences around them. I showed you those crummels form trees yesterday that kind of grow bent right over, and it catches snow, makes drifts around it to protect them. That's not their genetically predetermined shape. If I planted that tree somewhere else, it would grow straight up and down, right? That's the way it grew because the environment dictated that was the best shape for it to have, right? It's the same with those plants over there, okay? I told you the other day that those 2 plants came from a cutting of the same plant. They're genetically identical, but they don't look exactly the same, right? They have general similarity in shape, but they're not exactly the same. All right, so even plants that are genetically identical aren't going to grow up to look the same. That is absolutely not the case for animals. If you have a genetically identical twin, you're going to grow up to look pretty much the same. Okay. All right, so we'll look at that. Okay, so plants have this problem. They're rooted to one location for life. If things get bad, they can't pick up and go. So they have to adapt to the conditions in which they live. Please. Right. Depends on the species of plant. Some plants are less, they have less longevity than others. Like a poplar tree, even if it's growing in perfect conditions for a poplar tree, it's probably going to live 60, 80 years, maybe something like that. Okay. Whereas a limber pine could live several hundred years. A giant sequoia, several thousand years. Okay, the oldest organism on Earth is the Methuselah tree. It lives in a hidden location in a national park in California, and it is thousands of years old. Okay, it all depends on the species. Some species of plants live a long time, and a dandelion lives for a few months, and that's it, right? It all depends on the kind of plant. Okay, perennial versus annual, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so it generally responds to environmental cues by adjusting its pattern of growth and development. Okay, because the program for development of the plant is somewhat plastic. Plants, and by plastic I mean it can change. Okay, it can be molded to any shape. Plants of the same species vary in body form much more than animals of the same species. So we're looking at this picture here that's got these trees growing on a very steep hillside. Okay, most of the trees are growing straight up and down. Okay, but it's kind of hard to see because of the lighting here, but there's a tree right here in the foreground that's growing like that. What would have caused a tree to grow like that? I mean, it's obviously not being shaded by anything. Why would it grow crooked? Max? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. A rock slide pushed it over when it was little, but didn't completely uproot it. So it started, you know, it was maybe about this tall when it got pushed over, and now it's growing straight back up again. Okay? Plants have a sense of up and down. It's important that they have a sense of up and down because up is generally where what is? The sun. Now, if you're a tree that's small and you're growing in a forest among other big trees, you may not always be able to detect exactly where the sun is. But up is a generally good direction to grow. Okay? So plants use their sense of up and down, which we call geotropism, okay, to grow upwards. If a plant gets tipped over, it helps them to rebalance themselves. If this tree were to keep growing out this way, it would get more and more mass outside of its center of mass, and eventually that mass would lead to tipping. Okay? If it starts to grow back up like this, sometimes they even grow a little bit back over their root system again to try and balance out, okay, that odd distribution. Okay? When I worked at the golf course, we had a tree that the creek had eroded underneath it, and it had fallen over it. Part of it was almost horizontal, and it was a very old tree. It was probably 2 feet thick at the trunk at the base. Okay? And it grew out like this. Again, this is my drawing here. Here's the There's the creek bed, okay? And this tree literally grew like this. My last year there, it finally fell into the creek. Okay, you can't balance that much weight, and we got kind of heavy rains, and it washed away the roots and fell in. Okay, but they can balance themselves pretty well. Okay, had it kept growing straight out like this, it would have still been able to carry out photosynthesis, but only on what side? On the top, right? Because that's where the sunlight would come from. If you grow up like this, well, you carry out photosynthesis on all sides. It's just better. Okay, growing straight up and down is smarter, okay, because it allows you to gain more surface area with which to grow. Okay. All right, so plants have that kind of sense of up and down, and that's what that tree there was doing. It's plastic enough that it can, change its shape to adapt to the environment. We can't do that. How do we adapt to an environment? We take off. We're mobile. Okay. Oh man, conditions are really bad here. I'm going to go. Okay. That's the way a mobile organism adapts. It's like, it sucks here. I'm leaving. Okay. All right. So a house plant on a windowsill grows towards the light. If you rotate the plant, it will soon reorient its growth and until its leaves once again face the window. Okay. And that was the example I showed you there with those two plants. Okay. Again, I torment my plants. All right. I leave them. I have them in here strictly for demonstration purposes. And I like them. But, okay. So the growth of the shoot towards light is called phototropism, positive because it's growing towards it. In rare cases, you can actually get negative phototropism. Very rare, right? Because why would a plant grow away from its light source? What do you do if something's really bright? Right, you go, oh man, that's really bright. Well, plants actually, they have a certain kind of luminosity that they like, the kind that comes from the sun naturally, right? But sometimes you get into a situation where you have overly bright light and plants will actually grow slightly away from it, okay, just because it's too much. Okay? It's too much for them. It's very, very rare. All right. In a forest or other natural ecosystems where plants are crowded, okay, phototropism directs growing seedlings towards the sunlight. If they can't see the sunlight, then geotropism will direct them towards it by having them grow straight up. Okay? This and other types of plant growth are controlled by plant hormones. Now, another example, because I worked at a golf course and dealt with plants all the time. Okay? We had a tree that had another weird shape. This is actually the shape of the trunk. Yeah, it really grew like that, right? And here's why. There was this bush that was right here, right beside it. So when this tree was a little itty-bitty sapling, it probably got shaded on one side by this bush. So it would grow, it kind of grew out to the side a little bit, and once it got out of the shade of the bush, it started growing back up again because geotropism would kick back in and say, all right, you're in the sun now, grow straight up, okay? And then it grew back over its root system and grew like that. It's the funkiest looking tree ever, right by number 12 green. But yeah, well, it was a great job. Okay. So anyway, that's how they would grow. They would adapt to, well, if I'm going to survive, I need light, and I'm only getting light on this side. Plants know what side is getting their light. They'll put more growth towards the light, and that eventually changes their shape. Now, how do you suppose a plant makes itself bend like that? How would you, in terms of growth, like, because a plant doesn't have muscles, it can't just go, yeah, I'm going to bend over this way. Okay, it's got to grow that way. How can it grow a bend? That's a weird one. Okay, I mean, the branches on that side are obviously going to grow better, but this is the trunk. This is the central part that's got this shape to it. So certainly it will grow more branches on that side. Okay? But here's how it does it. Within the stem, if you've got one side that's getting more light than the other, and you need to bend this way, you send more growth hormones to that side. Now it will grow faster. And if this side grows faster than this side, it passes that side. and that's what causes the bend. The cells on this side are short, the cells on this side are long, and it creates a pressure that bends the plant in that direction. Okay? And then the plant, when it needs to get right side up again, just sends the hormones to the other side, okay? Makes that side grow faster than this side, and that's what happens. Okay? It's differential rate of growth that can cause these tropisms. Right? They use certain hormones, which we haven't talked about yet, but we will, okay, to cause that differential rate of growth. Okay? So we might want to mention something like that, like tropisms, okay, differential rate of growth, okay, kind of an important thing. Okay, and we might want to say caused by hormones. We'll talk about which hormones in a minute. Okay, so that's the way that a plant can change its shape. Okay, is that an overly common thing? Not really. Most of the time plants don't encounter things that make them change their shape all that much, but we can make it happen artificially. You ever seen that bamboo that's got the twists in it? Kind of like a coil. Okay. Anyone know how they do that? Nope. It has nothing to do with light or gravity. Yeah, they tie it to a stick. Okay, they put like a piece of PVC pipe. That's whatever the, right? So they put a piece of pipe in there, and then they plant the bamboo next to it, and then they tie the bamboo to the pipe. And the bamboo grows towards where it's feeling the touch, and then they just keep tying it in, and it'll keep growing around the pipe. They just keep tying it to the pipe, and then when it's the shape they want, they untie it, pull the pipe out. Here's this cool looking piece of bamboo. Okay, plants respond, some of them respond to touch. Okay, it's another type of tropism called thigmotropism. Okay, that's a response to touch. Right? Peas are a prime example of that. If you've ever planted peas in your garden, you have to put a fence there for them so that they can climb it. Otherwise, they grow along the ground. They don't make very many peas, and the bugs get into the peas. Okay, but if you put a fence there, they put those little vines and tendrils around the pea fence, and they hold on. Right? Sweet peas do the same thing. Ivy. If you've ever seen ivy growing up an old building, ivy does the same thing. These plants actually do it. I found out the hard way with this plant right here. This plant used to grow in my kitchen, and it was on top of my cupboards. And everywhere where a new branch comes off, there's these little brown nodules. These plants also have them, probably easier to see on them. Okay, there's these little brown nodules everywhere there's a new branch. If those come in contact with drywall or other soft materials, they secrete a chemical that eats away the drywall. And it'll stick tendrils, and they almost look like a root, but they're a tendril, into the wall. And you don't really notice it until you go to move the plant, which is what happened to me. Okay? Got married, moved into a new house, picked that plant up off the cupboard, stepped down off the cupboard, and pulled a chunk of drywall out of the wall about that big. Okay? Because the plant had grown in behind the drywall. Right? It was like, it looked like veins behind the drywall. Okay? It had grown in there and was anchored. It wasn't using it. There was no light in there. There's no photosynthesis going on in there, but it was anchoring itself to the wall so that it didn't have to support its own weight. Okay? It used the wall to support its weight, which is what ivy does too. Ivy, when it touches bricks and things like that, it secretes a little bit of acid that allows it to get a foothold into the ivy, and then into the brick, sorry, and then it uses the brick to support its own weight. Well, that allows it to grow tall a lot faster because it doesn't have to grow thick and support its own weight. So all its growth can be directed upwards. Okay? And that's why ivy crawls up the sides of buildings. Yeah, so there was a lot of spackle on that part of the wall before I moved out. Okay? A lot of drywall repair there. It's very fun. Okay, is that making sense? Okay, so there's 5 classes of hormones that we're going to talk about, okay, and each is concerned with a particular environmental stimulus and type of growth. Okay, now, what do you suppose those little sprouts are growing towards? Those are growing towards the sun. What's with the weird one? Why would he grow out that way? Yeah, the quickest route into the sun for this plant is actually to grow that way. Okay, is to grow up and get the sunlight that comes over these ones. That's the quickest way to the sun for it. Otherwise, it would have to grow like, and that's a lot more growth. And it involves a curve. Growing straight is easier, okay, and faster. So it grew out over that way. Okay, auxins are the first type of plant hormone that we're going to talk about. Okay, and it's used to describe any chemical substance that promotes elongation of the plants. Okay, that means it gets longer. Okay, the plant gets longer as a result of auxins. Okay, auxins do this by actually making individual cells grow longer. Okay, it doesn't make the cells divide. It makes the cells get longer. So this is the hormone that's most involved with tropisms. Okay, if you want the cells on one side, or if you want one side of your stem to bend, you tell the cells on that side to grow faster, okay, or to grow longer and faster. And auxins are the ones that will do that. Okay, so the single most important function of auxin is to stimulate the elongation of cells in young developing shoots. Okay. So auxin's not going to have a lot to do with growth on the outside of the trunk of a tree. Okay, it's going to have mostly to do with the young new branches and buds that are coming off. Okay, mostly to do with new growth. Okay, so auxins are hormones, and if you get too much hormone, is that good or bad? It can be. Okay, ever seen what happens when people take steroids? Okay. I mean, there's the first off obvious effects that they desired by taking steroids, which is gigantic, hulking, freakish muscles. Okay, but there's other side effects to that. Like what? What can happen if you take steroids? You can develop heart problems because heart's made of muscle and actually can develop strange musculature on the heart that's not good. Okay, and if you're suddenly got a lot more hormones in your body, something has to break them down when they're done their job. What organ does that? No, what organ? Right here. It's big. Starts with L. Liver. Liver. Okay, your liver. Okay, people who take a lot of steroids usually end up with liver problems. Okay, usually like cirrhosis of the liver, cancers of the liver, okay, things like that. It's very, very bad for your liver. Whether you take them orally or whether you take them injection or by injection, they still affect your liver. Taking them orally affects your liver more quickly. But having too much of a hormone that's supposed to be in a certain amount naturally in your body is going to have negative effects. Okay? The other place it can have negative effects is on the gland that is supposed to produce that hormone. Right? If we're talking about, let's say, testosterone, for example. Okay? Testosterone is a common muscle-building anabolic steroid. Where is it naturally produced? Yes, in the testicles. Okay, that's where the gland that produces testosterone is produced. Well, if you're injecting large amounts of testosterone into your body, the glands that produce it don't need to produce it anymore. And they get lazy and shrink. Think about it. Okay, sometimes the surrounding organs to that area also shrink. Think about it. Okay? There are certain drawbacks to having gigantic muscles, and that other things may not be gigantic. Okay, so you certainly want to be mindful of the side effects of having too many hormones in your body. Okay, and the same thing is true for any hormone. Okay, when women start to develop menopause or go into menopause, they'll often treat that with artificial injections of female sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and things like that. Because as you enter menopause, the ovaries stop producing those things. Okay, but of course then having those extra hormones in the body can cause other types of problems, namely breast cancer, okay, and things, and like uterine cancer, cervical cancer, things like that, because those are the areas that those hormones affect. And if they're affecting those areas in a different way than they're naturally supposed to, it can cause problems. Okay, so having too much of a certain hormone is a bad thing. People discovered this with plants. Okay, it's also true with plants. These two pictures here are of the same place, a few weeks apart. Okay, taken in 1968, 69. Drastic changes were made in Southeast Asia. What would have been going on 68, 69 in Southeast Asia? Not logging. War. These are taken in Vietnam. Okay. During the Vietnam War, the Americans had a big problem. There's lots of places to hide in the jungle. And the Viet Cong, the communist soldiers, had lots of good hiding places. They had an extensive tunnel system that ran underneath the ground, and they would pop out of nowhere and kill the American patrols. Well, the Americans, not really liking that, decided, well, if you're going to hide in the forest, we're going to get rid of the forest. Okay? So what did they do? Well, you can't burn a tropical rainforest down, okay? And it's too muddy to get logging equipment in there and that kind of stuff, so they needed a way to kill off all the trees that didn't involve setting them on fire. I mean, napalm is good, but it eventually, you know, fizzles out, and it's got all those nasty side effects of killing civilians and things like that, so they didn't really want to do that. So what they did is they told the CIA, you need to come up with something that's going to kill all these trees. No, not bombing, okay? So the CIA said, all right, we'll get our best chemists on it. And shortly thereafter, big canisters of Agent Orange began being attached to helicopters. Okay? Agent Orange is a defoliant. You spray it on trees and they die. And they die pretty quickly because they grow themselves to death. Okay? It's an artificial auxin. Then when it hits the leaves, it gets absorbed through the stomates and it signals rapid cell growth. Rapid cell growth. Cell growth that is so rapid that it cannot be sustained by photosynthesis. So the plant, eventually, it's growing so fast that it can't feed itself, it can't feed that growth, and it actually starves. All right? It grows itself to death. All right? And then, no more forest. All right, so they had these helicopters that were specially fitted with spraying apparatus, and they would fly over the forest and spray this stuff, which smells vile. Has anyone ever sprayed Killex? The stuff that kills dandelions but not your grass? That's Agent Orange. That's where that came from. Okay? Killex is Agent Orange. It kills all broad-leafed plants. Okay? And the plants that grow in the rainforest have very broad leaves. Right? That's why it doesn't kill grass. Grass has blades, not broad leaves. So it gets absorbed. It causes this growth reaction to happen, and pretty soon the forest is gone. Right? So they would put the guys that they had a special like helicopter flight group that was responsible for spraying this stuff. They all painted Smokey the Bear on their helicopters, and then wrote, "Only you can prevent forest." It has 6 sense of humor, but okay, yeah, so that's what they would do. Now, unfortunately, it was later discovered that this stuff doesn't just kill trees, it kills lots of things. In fact, it's a carcinogen, and it caused all kinds of growths and cancers in the people that it was sprayed on, including the American soldiers, right? Because they were down there doing whatever, and the helicopters would spray them. It's like, it's just for plants, it's not going to hurt you. Put your rain poncho on, and you'll be fine, except that when you inhale the stuff, it gets in your lungs, and it can cause lung cancer, and a lot of people died of those kinds of diseases, livestock, all kinds of stuff. So it ended up being even more of a tragedy than just the deforestation it caused. All right, so other things that we can use auxins for. It can cause the growth of seedless fruit, because the reaction between pollen and the stigma of the flower that I showed you there the other day, okay, that reaction causes the secretion of a certain amount of auxin, because we want to get that area growing into a fruit quickly. So if you dilute this stuff and spray it on very, very lightly onto the flowers, it will trick the flowers into thinking that they've been pollinated, and they'll grow fruit. But since they haven't been pollinated, there's no egg and sperm that can meet. So you don't get any seeds. You get a fruit with no seeds. Right? So that's how they make seedless fruit. Okay. Now, obviously, the Food and Drug Administration says it's perfectly safe to eat seedless fruit. That's how they make it. Yeah. Okay. It's very, very dilute. It's just enough to trick the flower into thinking it's been pollinated. Okay. And then you get seedless fruit that way. All right. So the herbicide 2,4-D, okay, that's Agent Orange, Killex, okay, weed and feed, all that kind of stuff. Okay, causes weeds to grow out of control, and that growth becomes lethal, and the weed dies. So this is what a natural kind of weed would look like: a fairly complex root system. Okay, a few leaves and one shoot. You spray it, it stops growing roots, and tries to grow more of these shoots, and it just grows to death. If a plant produces more than one seed, it sometimes results that it actually got pollinated but not fully pollinated, so like 1 or 2 pollen grains, and there's more than one egg producing more than one seed. Yeah. All right, so yeah, that's how that all works. Okay, next thing, cytokinins. Cytokinins are so named because they cause cytokinesis, cell division. Now, a healthy amount of cell division is important. It helps you to replace cells that are getting old, okay? Helps you to sustain new growth. Okay? But if you're always producing new cells, that can help you to live a long time. And this is one of those reasons, or one of those hormones that is the reason for plants, some plants anyway, having very, very long lifespans. They're constantly replacing the old, dead, or poorly functioning cells by causing cell division to replace them. Okay? So when plants produce this, they essentially get new growth. So if we genetically alter a plant, we can cause it to produce lots and lots of cytokinins. And so instead of looking like this, which a plant would look like normally, we can cause it to grow all over the place. Okay? And just produce new growth all over, okay, by dividing and dividing. But what if you get too much of that? What's rapid uncontrolled cell division known as? It's deadly. Cancer, yeah. Okay, it's called cancer, right? When these kind of hormones were first discovered, it's like, oh, that's the fountain of youth. We got to figure out how to make that happen in people. It doesn't work so well. Okay, rapid cell growth or rapid cell division in people is not the fountain of youth. It's the fountain of death. Okay, so we don't want that. Okay? It doesn't work that way. You have to have only very small amounts of it, and then it doesn't end up doing much for an animal. So this is only effective for plants. Okay. All right, so cells divide, okay, they can replace old, diseased, or damaged cells. So that's what cytokinins do. They cause cell division, and they slow down the aging process. Okay, gibberellins. Okay, gibberellins, okay, are also a type of growth hormone. Okay, they produce growth in both leaves and the stem. So not in new shoots, but in tissue that already exists. So if the plant has already produced a leaf, I'm trying to find a really small one, like this little tiny leaf here, right? It's not a mature leaf yet. It's not as big as this one. So gibberellins would now cause that tissue to grow and expand and become more mature. Okay? It also affects growth in the stems, which again is not shoots. Okay? It's simply lengthening of the stem. The problem with getting too much gibberellins is it doesn't cause an increase in the girth of the stem. It only causes an increase in the length of the stem. So if a plant grows really tall but doesn't get wider, it's going to tip over. It's going to fall over. All right? And the Chinese noticed that this happened in rice sometimes. Okay? And it was later discovered that there's a fungus that grows on the roots of rice plants. Because they grow in, like, have you ever seen rice paddies? Okay, it's like they're flooded all the time. The rice grows out of like the flooded mud. Okay, so this fungus would grow on the roots, and it would cause the roots to secrete more gibberellins than they should. And the rice plants would do this: they would grow really long and skinny and fall over and die. Okay, and the Chinese called it foolish seedling disease. Okay, because they would only do it when they were young. If they were mature, the fungus didn't seem to have the same effect. It only seemed to happen when they were young and trying to get length. Okay, that's when the foolish seedling disease would show up. Okay, so in stems, gibberellins stimulate cell elongation and cell division. So there's two kinds of growth that a plant needs to show. Primary, that's up and down, and secondary, that's girth. Okay, you have to have the secondary growth to support the primary growth. Okay, so other things, gibberellins, okay, can cause an increase in the number of flowers, blossoms that are produced. Now, if you get more blossoms, though, what's going to happen to the size of the fruit? It'll be smaller. Yeah, okay, an increased number of blossoms means more fruit, but smaller fruit. Okay, so if you ever get those like supersized grapes, they probably didn't have much gibberellins in them. Okay, you've seen those ones? They're like, they look like you could mistake them for a Granny Smith apple. Okay, like they're huge. Right? So a lot of stuff we use, we can use these hormones by spraying certain things on the plants that will trigger their production, and that gives us certain desirable outcomes, either small, really sweet grapes, or we want really big grapes, or whatever. Okay, we can do those kinds of things. Okay. All right. Sorry, I had that backwards. I said, sorry, it's bigger fruit, less fruit, bigger fruit. Sorry, I said that backwards. Gibberellins cause less but bigger. Yeah, it says it right here. Sorry, got that backwards in my head. Okay, so gibberellins are used commercially to increase fruit size in table grapes. That's what we were just talking about. Okay, and to regulate citrus flowering and rind maturation. So basically, it delays the ripening of the citrus fruit so that they can pick them when they're not quite ripe and ship them, and they'll stay good for longer. So you won't have as many that rot in the box. Like, they should really use this more for Christmas oranges, right? Because you buy a box of Christmas oranges, there's always 2 or 3 in there that are rotten, okay? Unless you're the person that opens the box and picks them all out and puts new ones in. I'm not saying that's wrong, but okay. It helps to delay the rind, which is the peel, from maturing quickly. Okay, abscisic acid. This is an important one for plants around here. And in fact, they finished secreting it probably about a month ago. Abscisic acid is the hormone that disrupts the production of chlorophyll. That signals a plant that it is time for dormancy. So day length will signal the production of abscisic acid. Abscisic acid interrupts the pathway that makes chlorophyll. The plants stop producing it. The leaves are not going to be green anymore. When there's less photosynthesis going on, the tree doesn't need to transport as much water. Now the leaves dry up and they fall off, and the plant is dormant and ready for winter. There's no water in the xylem anymore, so there's no worry of it freezing and cracking the tree. Okay, so abscisic acid is important for assuming a dormant state, and we might want to write in there that it disrupts chlorophyll production. Okay, and that leads to leaves changing color. Okay, and then eventually falling off. So what this guy, what's showing up here is that he's got all these plants that have essentially been forced to produce abscisic acid in different amounts. Okay, the ones in the front have produced a lot. Okay, and then as you go further back, you've got plants that are obviously not dormant. Okay, they're flowering, they're active, they're tall, they're dark green. Okay, they obviously have very little abscisic acid in them. So the production of abscisic acid disrupts chlorophyll, then they can't do any of this growth. Okay, so plants for us do that as days get shorter. Plants in the desert secrete it as days get longer. All right, so it's a different, depending on what type of plant you are and where you grow, abscisic acid may be produced by days getting longer as opposed to days getting shorter. They're always green, yes, but they don't carry out photosynthesis in the winter because they can't transport water. Right, the water would be frozen, so they can't move it. It's just the nature of their leaves. Their leaves are not like the leaf diagram that we went over because they're needles. Okay, the needles retain their color because they have a thicker, waxy cuticle, okay, and things like that. So they retain that color. Their pigments are different than a deciduous tree. Now, there's some trees that have needle leaves that lose their leaves. You ever seen like a tamarack or a larch? Okay, they're really pretty in the fall. It's a pine tree that turns bright orange and loses its leaves, loses its needles every year. So there actually are deciduous coniferous trees. Most of them aren't, but there's a few. Okay, there's actually quite a few in Kananaskis. You can see it on the hillsides in Kananaskis in the fall. Okay, ethylene. Ethylene is responsible for the banana principle. Are you guys familiar with the banana principle? It is a corollary of Murphy's Law applied to bananas. If you buy bananas when they're green, you will eat them before they are ready. If you buy bananas when they are yellow, they will be black before you eat them. It is because of ethylene gas that this is true. Bananas, more than anything else, produce ethylene gas in large volumes. Apples will also produce ethylene gas. Okay? Any ripening fruit produces ethylene gas, but bananas produce it more than anything else. So you don't want to have bananas around other fruit. Okay? If you put bananas next to strawberries, you will have rotten strawberries in days. Okay? Like 2 days, because they release so much ethylene that they'll over-ripen and they'll be mushy, okay, and gross. All right? You probably noticed it doesn't take long for bananas to change color, right? Okay, it's like 3-4 days and they go from this to black, right? Because they release a lot of ethylene gas. Now, tomatoes, apples. So we got apples here. We got tomatoes, green and okay. As they ripen, okay, they produce ethylene gas. Now, ethylene gas is also it also affects the leaf tissue of the plant. Once the plant has produced fruit, does it need to do anything else? Well, but usually fruit is near the end of the season, right? Okay, if this is an annual plant, like a tomato or something like that that's only going to grow 1 year, once the ethylene starts to be produced, it's actually a signal for the plant to die. Okay, it actually signals the cessation of photosynthesis and all that, because the plant wants the fruit, or the plant, once the fruit is produced, the plant needs to stop growing so that the fruit will fall off, right? Because what's inside the fruit? The seeds. If the plant keeps growing, then there's a risk that everything will get frozen, or or something like that. So fruit is designed to do one thing: spread the seeds of the plant. Now that can be done in a couple of ways. If it's an annual plant, it's not a big deal for the fruit to fall off and land right where the plant grew the year before, because the next year that plant's not growing back. The seeds will grow in a whole new plant. That'll work. If for something like an apple or something like that, where the parent plant is going to grow back again the next year, you probably don't want the seeds growing right underneath the tree. So how do they get moved? Well, they can fall further from the tree, or they can be eaten. Yeah. Okay. I mean, fruit is sweet for a reason. Okay. It entices animals to come along and eat the fruit, and they don't eat it like we do, where we avoid the seeds. They eat the whole thing. Okay. And then they walk away and deposit the seeds in a nutrient-rich medium somewhere else where they can grow. In fact, there are some plants whose seeds will not germinate unless they go through the digestive tract of an animal, because they have a coating on them that won't allow them to germinate unless it's removed by the digestive enzymes of the inside of an animal's stomach. Okay, so yeah, it's all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, that's how plants got out to the Hawaiian Islands. I mean, the Hawaiian Islands are way out in the middle of the ocean. Okay, there's no plants growing anywhere near those Hawaiian Islands, but birds can fly there. Okay, and they'd eat fruit, fly over the islands, poop on the islands. Plants grow. Yeah, weird, huh? Okay, now, we just recently most people would have just kind of harvested their tomatoes and things like that, and unfortunately in Canada we have to pick them when they're green, because it's going to frost and destroy them if we don't. Okay, so I know I went out and I picked all of my tomatoes out of the garden, and then I put them in a bucket, and I throw an apple in there, and then I cover the bucket. Okay, because I want my tomatoes to ripen. I don't want them to stay green. Throwing an apple in there will increase the ripening rate significantly, because it'll release ethylene gas and they'll turn red faster, and then I can make my spicy salsa and I'm all good to go. Okay, so that's a little trick that you can use. A lot of people just put their tomatoes like all together on the windowsill, and that's fine, but then you're relying only on the production of ethylene gas by the tomatoes. Right? If you want that to be a little faster, leave a couple of leaves on. Okay? And the production of ethylene gas is a little bit quicker with the leaves on. Okay? A while back, they had these green bags that you could buy. Okay, and you could put your produce in them, and they had a lining that absorbed ethylene gas. Okay, and it was supposed to keep them good for a longer period of time. Okay, it seemed like a good product. I never bought one. But, okay, ethylene causes the ripening of fruit and the aging or senescence. Okay, meaning goes dormant or dies. Okay, of a plant. Okay, now we're going to look at the tropisms. Okay, tropisms are growth responses that result in curvatures of the plant. Remember, we talked about how those curvatures are caused. Okay, there's differential rate of growth on each side of the plant caused by what hormone? Auxins. Okay, auxins cause the lengthening of cells on one side to be faster than on the other. That causes the plant to bend, okay, and then get these funky shapes. Right? So the mechanism for tropism is a differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides. Okay? And there's 3 stimuli that'll cause that to happen. What would be causing this one? I tip over that pot, and the plant starts to grow up and down. That's geotropism. Okay? Simply gravity. There's nothing to shade this. It would get the same amount of light if it was growing out from the pot as well. So this is simply, I know which way is up and down, and I'm supposed to grow that way. Okay? They've actually proposed that they want to do some studies of plant growth on the International Space Station because they want to see how plants will grow in the absence of gravity. There's just this one problem. Dirt is heavy and messy, and you don't want dirt in a zero gravity environment because it doesn't fall to the ground then, and people would inhale it, and it would be generally bad. So they're trying to work out some way to get around the whole plants grow in dirt problem with like hydroponics or something like that. Okay, so geotropism is caused by gravity, and you can see it in plants that grow on steep hillsides. Okay, this tree right here is showing a little bit of that. Okay, and obviously the tipped over pot there is showing the same thing. Right, so there's a number of situations that can cause that. A windstorm can blow a plant over, and if it doesn't get completely uprooted, it'll start growing upright again. Okay, things like that. Okay, phototropism, we already said, is caused by the location of light sources. So if we've got light on this side of the plant, the cells on the other side of the plant need to grow faster so that they can orient the plant so that when it starts to grow leaves, the leaves will face the sun. Okay, we want to have that orientation towards the sun. Okay, so that now you can see that that's what these plants are doing here. Okay, they grew crooked so that their leaves would face the sun. Right, so that's what we see here. This side is going to get more auxins than this side, and as a result, the cells on this side are longer than the ones on this side. That causes the bending of the plant. Okay, and then there's thigmotropism, and that's stimulated by touch, the vines and tendrils that grow until they touch something, and then they'll coil around them. Okay, this is an example here. You got like one of those tendrils that's actually coiled around another leaf, and it's using that leaf to support itself. Right? These two things here are essentially two, I think they're chickweed or something like that, but this one had a stick in the pot, okay, that was allowing the plants to grow around it. Okay, and so they were able to grow taller because they didn't have to support their weight. Okay, so crawling up something allows you to get taller more quickly. Yeah, we also talked about how peas are an example of that, sweet peas are an example, and ivy, okay, is also an example of that. Okay, and sometimes it's not a mechanical attachment like this is. This is mechanical because it's the plant actually curling around something. Sometimes it's chemical, right? They secrete something that dissolves the material they're touching, and then they can get a foothold into it. Okay, I want you guys to answer those 5 questions, and then we'll go through them here in a minute. Okay, so 2 identical plants may grow up to look entirely different. Why would that be? Right, the shape of a plant isn't genetically predetermined. It depends on their environment. Okay, any growth pattern in a plant is referred to as a tropism. Okay, do plants in the tropical rainforest require abscisic acid? Right, they never go dormant. If you go dormant in the tropical rainforest, you're dead, okay, because you're going to be getting 12 hours of sun and 12 hours of darkness every day the whole year long. Okay, long exposure to 2,4-D, which is that kill X, Agent Orange, okay, has been shown to produce cancerous tumors in humans. Why might this happen? What do we call excessive cell growth? Cancer. Well, it causes excessive cell growth. Okay, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't really stimulate division, but it causes cells to grow quickly. Okay, and that's not a good thing. All right. And number 5, this hormone is involved in the ripening of fruit. Ethylene. Right. Okay.